Credit scores have a direct impact on a person's ability to take out a loan and receive better interest rates. And with nearly 3/4 of South Africans saying that their credit scores are important to them through a survey conducted by TransUnion, there's still a lack of understanding, though, about how credit reports are generated and what a score comprises. And joining us to discuss the difference between a credit score and a credit report, the importance of either, and to talk generally about the South African credit behaviours, is the Senior Director for TransUnion, Garnet Jansen. And Garnet is with us to tell us a bit more, and appreciate it, your time.
Good to be here.
To
Thanks,
be with
Tim.
us, and I hope you can solve my problem, right, in the next
hope so
minute or
too.
so. Because I've been very, very disappointed a couple of times going into a store and generating credit and thinking that I'll walk home with whatever I wanted to buy on credit. And then I get told a day later or so that my credit or application has been declined.
And you're not alone, Tim.
Yeah.
So if we look at credit and credit active consumers in South Africa, there's about 24 million, and about 40% of that 24 million have some kind of adverse listing against their credit score. And that's 9 to 10 million people in the country, and it's really 9 to 10 million people that need to sit up, take notice and take note in terms of what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Sure. So now, let's look at rule of thumb, given that almost to a person, people have some credit in one form or the other, whether
Yes.
it be a mortgage bond or anything of that sort.
Yes.
What is it? How should you calculate the kind of credit that you can take on the income you have?
So taking on credit and the amount of credit that you can take on differs from financial institution to financial institution.
Yes. Yeah.
At TransUnion, we're a credit bureau, and we facilitate that process. So if I can explain the role of credit bureaus. So what credit bureaus are, in very kind of simplistic terms, they're aggregators of credit information. So we go to the banks and other credit providers, as well as the courts and utility providers, and we collect a bunch of credit-related data. We then take that data and we build a consumer credit profile. That credit profile is then made available to specific organizations in order to make credit decisions.
Sure.
And those organizations are typically your banks, but it can include mobile cell phone operators, etc. And what they will do is they will those financial institutions will take your credit report, they'll take your credit score, and a few other pieces of data, specifically the stuff you put in the application, and then based on that, they'll make a decision. What's important here is your credit report and credit score are primary inputs into that process, and they determine, they make a big determination in terms of A, whether you get that credit, like you said, and also B, what the terms of that credit. So what interest rate, what payment term, and any other kind of deposits or securing securities. Now,
I read somewhere that more than 72% of households in South Africa are overextended, you see. So, and I'm interested to know that generally speaking, before we even check our credit scores and so forth, so we can at least be in control of our own finances, how much of our incomes should be spent on credit anyway? I mean, the tolerable level or the threshold that is reasonable.
So it's very difficult to generalize, because from kind of a low income earner to a top income earner, it's going to change. So I can't give you a specific answer around that. But what I can say, I can talk to your earlier point around 72% of households are in trouble in terms of credit. And TransUnion also runs a consumer credit index. Which we released quite recently. And we score the credit health of the country between 0 and 100, with 50% being the middle mark.
Sure.
Now, if your score is above 50, it means households' credit situation is improving. If it's below 50, it means general household credit situation is getting worse. And for the past two reports, and I think actually further back, it's been sitting out at around the 47 to 48 level. So you're certainly correct in saying households are in trouble and getting into further trouble from a credit perspective.
Okay, let's look at the credit reports then and the
Yes.
credit scores. How are these generated? You have given a sense earlier on.
Yes.
And at what point would you say that a score may lead to an adverse finding against you?
Okay, great question, Tim. So let's talk about what's in a credit report.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information, and it's typically a credit report in layman's terms is your report card for your financial status. Okay, so it represents your financial behavior and how you've been paying for your credit. So you thought you left report cards behind when you left school, but actually industry continues to generate a report card about your status. And that report card contains 4 pieces of information. Firstly, your personal information, which includes your name, address, ID, etc., but also your employment information. Then yours, what we call the account listing. So those are your bank accounts, your retail accounts, your cell phone accounts, and it talks to how you've been paying over those accounts over the last 24 months being the most important, but we can keep up to 5 years of data there.
Okay.
Third section is your adverse listings. And this is where consumers need to pay particular attention because it has quite a profound impact on your credit score, which I'm going to get to now. And those are your judgments, your defaults, your sequestrations. And then the last section is what we call the inquiry section. So every time, Tim, you spoke about going to apply for credit. Every time you apply for credit, we take note of that and we call it an inquiry. So you made an inquiry for credit. And why that's important is what we see is when consumers, when we see a sudden change of inquiries, when we see a lot of inquiries coming through for a consumer in a short space of time, that's a leading indicator that their financial situation has changed and most likely for the worse. So those are the 4 sections. Now, like you said, a credit score is different from a credit report. And in our survey, 36% of South Africans didn't know the difference. And I actually don't blame them because when we talk about the two, we talk about the two interchangeably, and very often they're packaged together. But a score, like it says, is a number. And it's a 3-digit number. And what we do is we take key points in that report, but we focus on the payment history. We focus on the adverse listings. We look at, and this will perhaps answer your earlier question, we look at the level of debt that you have. And as a rule of thumb, you don't want to go over 35%. So if I've got a credit card with 1,000 Rand in it,
Yes.
by the end of the month, ideally I should have paid it off so the balance is below 350 Rand.
Okay.
We look at the mix of credits.
Yes.
So, for example, a home loan, car loan, and cell phone contract would be considered better than microloans and credit cards.
Yes.
And we also look at your history and your adverse listings. And that's what gets counted towards a credit score. Now, like I said, a credit score is a 3-digit number. In TransUnion's case, it's between 0 and 1,000. And a lot of people say, what's a good credit score? And it's a bit of a how long is a piece of string kind of question. But what we do is we grade the credit score into 5 grades: poor, fair, good, very good, and excellent. Obviously, you want to be kind of king of the hill. You want to be top of the pile at the top there. But if you go by the descriptive terms, you want to look at a good, very good, and excellent, at least good, which starts on about 720.
Okay. Now, you call it adverse finding.
Yes.
On your credit score. Let me call it by its true name, blacklisting. Okay?
Okay.
So, because that's what troubles a lot of people.
I knew that was going to come up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what must you do to avoid being blacklisted? Because I don't think a lot of people just sit back and leave things to be without trying to manage or avoid being blacklisted in that way. So, generally speaking, given that people have got a lot of credit, there's a way in which it must be managed so that you don't get blacklisted in
Correct.
in time.
Now, blacklisting is a bit of a misnomer, and a lot of people say, yeah, the credit bureaus blacklisted me, and that's actually something I want to talk around, because credit bureaus don't blacklist.
Yes.
What we do is we're an aggregate of information from credit providers, both positive and negative.
Yeah.
So we don't put a blacklisting mark against the consumer. If a credit provider has noted a negative action against you, that comes through on your profile, is considered blacklisting. And typically what you'd consider blacklisting as is those adverse listings which you spoke about. So it's defaults. If you haven't paid an account for more than typically 90 days, if you've got a judgment or if you've got a sequestration against yourself. That's generally what we refer to blacklisting. And what people need to do is obviously pay attention to that. And it's not, you don't get just blacklisted in the background. There's a lot of rules, and this is why the national credit regulators around in the National Credit Act is to make sure consumers are protected. So credit providers have to go through quite a stringent process of notifying clients, giving clients or customers time to get back to them, to dispute it, etc. So there's a specific period of time that they need to pass, and then there's specific communication that they have to have with the customer before they can list those adverse listings.
Now, let's empower ourselves, because we don't have to wait for those who give credit to know what our situation is, right? And I think that's where you come in as TransUnion.
Yes.
What can we do to be assisted by yourselves?
Okay, great question. So first things first, get access to your credit report and score.
Yeah.
Okay. So an interesting statistic. So 24 million credit active South Africans. On an annualized basis, only 600,000 are looking at their credit report. That's less than 6% of that 24 million.
Yeah.
So look at your credit report, understand it, unpack it. Okay. Then once you start looking at it, pay specific attention, especially to the adverse listings section. And also look at your payment history. So a lot of people, what they will do is they'll pay half this month and double next month, and they think it'll even out. That's not the case. So that half that you paid that month will be reflected in your credit report. So pay your accounts on time and in full.
That's the rule of thumb, right? But how do we access the reports then? What do we do?
So another good question, every credit bureau has to provide credit reports to their consumers. And interestingly, every consumer can get one free credit report from the credit bureau on an annualized basis. At TransUnion, we've got a call center and we've got a website that you can go to and get your free credit report.
So what's the address so we can get our free credit reports? So this time
So the call center, we can be contacted at 0861 482 482.
Right.
And the web address is www.mytransunion.co.za.
That's it. Well, we just want to have our viewers sorted out before the festive season. So I'm going to jump on it right away and make sure that at least I can deal with the adverse findings against my name. Thanks very much, Garnet.
Thanks.
Much appreciated. So there you are. Get your own credit report, go through it, correct what needs to be corrected so that you can remain credit worthy.